So, Vesper's host, new dungeon. First dungeon that had contest mode. Very impressed. Very impressed by this dungeon. Let's talk about it. This is the first contest mode dungeon that we've ever had, and after seeing how it went, I hope we continue to see contest mode on dungeons. I thought it was going to go one of two ways. It was either going to be a stomp, or it's going to be a Salvation's Edge situation. And for myself, anyway, it was a Salvation's Edge situation, where it took way longer than I thought it was going to. The tuning of this place was incredibly tight. The first encounter had a timer that we cleared by 0 seconds. The second encounter was a decent DPS check, and a little similar to Aatrax in that it was a different type of damage phase than we are used to. And the final encounter had a brutal damage check, in addition to taking the Witness's damage phase and just turning that up even more, which I didn't really think possible. This place was not a pushover at all. It's quite tough, which I was surprised to see based on how I feel like a typical dungeon experience goes, where the mechanics aren't too tough to figure out, stuff like that. The res token situation was also very brutal, despite it being the exact same rules as a raid, 1 token per person. It just leaves even less room for failure compared to a raid. This place kicked my ass so bad that I got imposter syndrome. My feelings post Salvation's Edge are basically the same for this place. I'm getting my ass kicked out here. I don't know if I got it in me anymore, but knowing me, I'm going to be back in the contest raid next year, or the next dungeon, whatever happens, I'll probably be back. But I like having this experience around more often than not. I think contest mode Vesper was an overwhelming success. Hi, I'm the guy from that Cook Unity ad on YouTube, back with another Cook Unity ad. This Cook Unity ad is brought to you by Cook Unity. Cook Unity is a chefed consumer platform delivering fresh meals prepared by human people to your door every week. Cook Unity's chef roster includes Food Network alums, James Beard Award winners. You know, I'll say it for them because they would never admit it. They're kind of a big deal. And they're walking that tightrope of tasting good and being good for you, with tons of meals to pick from every single week. Myself and my wife Danielle have been using Cook Unity for months before they sponsored me, which is probably the best recommendation I could possibly give. Honestly, I think we could just end the segment right there. No, I gotta keep going. I love Cook Unity because I don't like cooking that much. The prep, the cleanup, I'm not into it. So being able to toss a chef-prepared meal into the oven after a long, arduous day of being a niche internet micro Z-list celebrity is a thing of beauty. My favorites currently are the Asian garlic noodles by Stacey Barang, the fried coconut shrimp by Nahika Hillary, and still the rigatoni and vodka sauce by Dustin Taylor. They finally brought it back, all out here in Seattle. I've been on a shrimp binge, I guess. I don't know why, but man, is it easy to clear these plates in a hurry. In all seriousness though, Danielle and I love Cook Unity. We continue to use it and we'll probably keep using it for the foreseeable future. To get 50% off your first order of Cook Unity meals, head on over to cookunity.com/Datto50 or hit the link in the description to try them for yourself. That's cookunity.com/Datto50, code Datto50, or the link in the description. Thank you very much to Cook Unity for sponsoring this video. What's also an overwhelming success is this dungeon. In general, we're back to the Deepstone Crypt vibes and the setting, and this place really kind of felt like if Bungie said, you know, what if we just tried it again? Operator, Scanner, Suppressor, they're all back, and while Operator isn't terribly different, its importance felt a bit higher. Scanner and Suppressor roles were completely reformulated though and function differently enough that it felt fresh to experience. I didn't feel like I was doing the exact same thing over again. First encounter on contest was a speed run and exercise in execution, and boy was it. The timings you needed to hit were incredibly tight, incredibly precise, leaving little to no room for error. On normal mode, it is simply an exercise in learning some core mechanics that you're going to use later down the road. You can split up on normal mode and just kind of share all the buffs in the buff refrigerator. Nothing really too stressful to complete, but a good intro nonetheless to some main mechanics. As far as non-boss encounters go, this one's okay. You gotta start somewhere, and if you recall, first loot encounters of the past 4 dungeons have all been on the very tame side, so I wasn't really expecting that cadence to change. Before we get to the second encounter, we have the pre-second encounter. No loot attached, but still a fun section to get through with having to open and close all the doors, the boss chasing you down, reminiscent of kind of like Scourge of the Past, but you just don't have a Sparrow. You're running all over the place, keeping track of your power reserves to open and shut doors. First time through was very engaging, as you don't really know where anything is, while future runs will be much faster since you do know where everything is, rewarding memorization. It tends to go fast enough that I don't really mind it on repeat runs, and let me tell you, I have done some repeat runs of this place. The only thing is probably maybe like it gets a little weird when people aren't on the same page. Like if one person's running way far ahead and it's kind of disjointed, it gets a little weird, but that's not a big deal. The second encounter is very novel, in my opinion. A lot of unique stuff going on here. Well, the pre-mechanic phase is just a lot of killing stuff. That's not really that novel. But you have the revised suppressor, which makes a decoy that you need to explode near your target. The servitor boss that gets broken down into a bunch of regular sized servitors that you then need to see which is highlighted to read their name and number to determine which panel you need to shoot, trigger the damage phase, all while the boss is throwing smaller exploding servitors at you. And if you stare at the boss too long, it's just going to kill you. It's pretty unique setup mechanic. I think my only gripe would be that the panel shooting part doesn't have as big of a display when you do it successfully, which is like the smallest nitpick in the world. I just wanted like a slightly bigger reaction from the game when you did it right, other than just like very quickly moving into the next phase. I guess all the enemies despawn, so that's kind of like a big signal enough, but it's fine. It's a super small nitpick. The damage phase being a giant blob of servitors that you just gotta damage is a pretty new way of doing DPS, encouraging more AoE-based setups versus single target. We don't typically have that. Consecration Titans, Behemoth Titans, Tether Hunters, although I know Tether is not that unique to, you know, DPSing, but still. Parasite, the grenade launcher that normally is reserved for Atrax, and that's it. I'm seeing Wardcliff Coil again. The heavy wave frame grenade launcher from Neo Muna is an amazing pick here, which is the first time that sentence has ever been said. One thing that my team thought was a mechanic was that when the two servitors are lit up, they have 4 dots on their face, so to speak. And we thought that was an additional mechanic to see which ones might be more susceptible to damage or something like that. Turns out it's nothing, but that could have maybe been cool where certain servitors are maybe more susceptible to damage, but then maybe it turns into a game of find the super weak servitor and then you're back to a single target thing, which isn't really that unique, so, you know. Alright, fine. Either way, the fight's fun. It can be over pretty quick if you know what you're doing. 1 phase, probably 2 phases. Then we have a lot of traversal, platforming sections, which so far haven't outstayed their welcome. I think they're maybe just on the cusp of being too long, but otherwise I think it's fine. Some of the urgency that I thought was missing from Warlord's Ruin, the final boss anyway, was restored here in what has to now be the most hectic damage phase in the game. Imagine the Witness damage phase, except now there's much less predictability, or what feels like less predictability, in the lightning strike attacks, and they can one-shot you, and then add in like 10 to 15 relatively weak but still threatening and annoying yellow bar enemies chasing you down and shooting you the entire time while the boss is also sniping at you. They really designed the Witness damage phase, and we were like, you know, no, that wasn't enough. It's time for more. Which I both love and hate at the same time. I love it because it's chaotic as hell, and it's just like a deal with it kind of thing. But I hate it because it can be very unforgiving at times. Although normal mode isn't as bad since you don't die as quickly, and you have res tokens, and the yellow bar enemies aren't as hard to kill. But I was ready to rage during contest mode, especially with this barrel strat we ended up going with, where you stand on top of this barrel in the middle to dodge lightning, where sometimes I would be killed and sometimes I wouldn't, despite doing the exact same thing every single time. It's just so easy to not see that you're about to be struck by lightning if you zone out for literally a second. I've also had deaths where my screen wasn't even lit up in yellow, or I was like barely on the edge of a circle of the strike and just went from 100 to 0 anyway. I'm sure there is some kind of pattern to the lightning strikes. I'm not sure what it is just yet. I haven't sat in there to just study and sit in a DPS phase. But on contest, having to survive this place, let's call it 2.5 times, was absolutely brutal. At least with the strategy that my team used, which was sit in wells, spam healing grenades with speaker sight, and ignore everything to shoot the boss. It was brutal with well spam and seeker sight spam. Normal mode, I'm just hopping around like an idiot, killing off these copies like who cares. But the lightning still being threatening is a nice touch for normal mode. I wish killing the copies actually gave you some kind of a benefit other than just a more open area to work with, even though I know that is kind of a reward. But maybe that's a more like solo-based complaint because normal mode copies aren't really that bad in the group. That's actually somewhat of an issue that I have with the core part of the encounter, the radiation dudes. The first 4 that spawn, you need to kill to trigger the next buff to show up. That's fine. It makes sense. The rest of the fight, though, they just exist to be annoying. You can completely ignore them, but the energy invested in killing them during other parts of the fight just doesn't feel worth it. It didn't feel worth it on contest mode. Like, I was just doing nothing because I was suppressor guy. I'm wondering if I'm missing something here or if they're truly just there to be annoying, which is something that I don't typically feel we have that often. Then we have the post-dungeon quest, which I have extensively covered, in addition to the Icebreaker Catalyst. Bungie took the blueprints that they had with Warlord's Ruin and improved them. Yeah, I know the quest doesn't really like the in-and-out nature of like checkpoint spam that much, but overall, I enjoyed the puzzle experience in this place for the quest, leading to some free weekly loot. It was more enjoyable than Warlord's Ruins, hunting down of some hidden caves. Then on top of that, you have an Imbaru engine level puzzle at the end of this chain, which is like the true puzzle, solvable by the giga brains out there in the world. I always appreciate the work that goes into something like this, even if it feels like it's designed for 17 people, like the puzzle at the end. Although, I mean, really the whole thing too, I appreciate it. I enjoy the experience of figuring out why the puzzle is solved how it is, the mechanics behind it. And this one also did not disappoint, although I wish I was smart enough to actually figure them out completely on my own, but, you know, that's not a problem I can really solve too quickly. Then we have the solo experience, and my experience has gone exactly as I thought it was going to. First encounter, no big deal. It's not bad. 10, maybe 15 minutes if you're playing it safe. Second encounter, also not that big of a deal. Little more intense, little more chance to die, but still very doable. I think my first kill was like a 3 phase, which took 18 minutes. Final encounter, I want to pull my hair out. If you thought any of the previous 3 dungeons had tough final encounters, I want to introduce you to the Corrupted Puppeteer because, my god, getting to the damage phase takes half the time of Ghost of the Deep, and yet I think I would still rather do Ghost of the Deep. The damage phase is absolutely brutal to deal with as a solo. That being said, I have finally locked down a strategy that is working for me, so hopefully I get this done pretty soon. The less risky you go, the more phases you're going to have to deal with, though. But if you were hoping that Bungie was addressing any feedback of solo dungeon bosses having a lot of freaking health, they did not address it here. And this is definitely, in my opinion, the most punishing solo flawless thus far. Overall, I have very few complaints about this dungeon as a whole. Before this dungeon, I wasn't sure if I even had a favorite dungeon. After this dungeon, this is my new favorite. It is probably the most raid-like dungeon Bungie has ever made. Some cool and unique ideas getting put in here, a familiar but refreshed setting, a good contest experience, a still enjoyable 3-man experience with secrets and puzzles afterwards to encourage repeat runs. Like, bravo, man. Phenomenal stuff. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.